Navigating through January and loan recall season, it's the Football Breakdown's Fantasy EFL preview show. It's Game Week 24, and I'm Matthew South.
And I'm Ian Cooper.
Yes, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Football Breakdown's Fantasy EFL preview show. We're into Game Week 24. We're well into the start of the second half of the season now. We're trying to get through the January transfer window. Even just trying to record this, there's been a few more recalls in the last 24 hours, a few new signings, trying to make sure that we're not picking any players who are at risk of not featuring this weekend because of a transfer or because of a recall. So it's made the game quite interesting, actually, I feel. I don't know what you think about it, Ian.
Yeah, definitely. The tinkering going on is I can't stop changing my team around. Still haven't really decided on it for this week, and I'm pretty sure as the pod's going on, things are still going to change again. So we're just going to be on it this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's some big players in the game who have obviously switched around. You know, like brings us on nicely to last week. But Nathan Lowe played his last game for Walsall before being recalled to Stoke. He was my captain last week. 15 points, doubled to 30. And definitely managed to make the most of him while he was on that Walsall loan. But it's a shame to see that he's gone. But I am interested to see what happens going on with him, because Tom Cannon's then been recalled by Leicester City from Stoke, so maybe he will get a chance there. But does that make him a viable fantasy player still or not? Like, stuff to be seen. For the rest of last week, though, none of my other players were recalled or anything. We did have to navigate the weather conditions and the postponements from the FA Cup.
Yes.
It was quite a tricky one. With that, I think I changed my team about 4 times after the pod. So it was, I managed to get through it with a solid 81 points myself. Lowe was the big hitter. Dimitri with an 11 as well and a clean sheet, but Crew didn't get the win. Lancaster didn't get the contributions there for me either. Joe Powell ended up being quite a nice pick, and ended up with Easy Pairs in goal for Blackburn for the clean sheet, and Pleguezuelo at the back. As I mentioned last pod, I was looking at him, and he managed to get the clearance points and outscore Kieran Brown, who was my initial pick. So for that game, which is good. And then Walsall obviously put 5 past Tranmere. Annoyingly, I swapped Allen for Barrett just in my team changes. At one point, I feel like it was the way I was edging towards the defender over the midfielder, and then the one Tranmere goal in their basically only attack of the game cost me that and cost me the Walsall clean sheet. But other than that, solid week for myself.
Yeah, and I ended up on 72 points. Pretty happy with the week in general. I think we ended up having quite similar teams. We had the same team selections in Crew and Walsall, so they've got the same points there. I had Ainsley Pairs in goal with Dimitri and Owen Beck as my sub-0.1 pick, who managed to get 10 points, so pretty happy there. Had Taylor Allen, got 2 assists from centre-back, and Nathan Lowe on his potential last appearance for Walsall, getting the 15 points there. My 2 players that did let me down, Alex Robertson only got 4 points. It wasn't really action-packed for that game, and sadly, Lancaster only got the 2 points. That game was suspended for an hour, I believe, due to fog. When it got kicked off, it stopped in the 3rd minute, and I really think that affected how the game played when it got restarted. It was a very boring 0-0, and sadly, I captained him as well. So I got 4 points, doubling from 2, when the rest of my team did really well. I could have captained anyone and had a really good week, but I had to go and captain him.
Always the way. Yeah, as we come into this week, it's a double game week for the Championship, and then League 1 and League 2 do have some rearrangements as well. So I believe there's 3 League 1 games and 2 League 2 games that involve teams that are going to be playing twice, because there is also the normal League 1 and League 2 schedule over the weekend. But because it's Championship heavy, we're going to do our usual Championship only podcast. We've split up the games. We're going to basically talk about one game from the first round of fixtures each and talk about a player across the game week. If Ian, I believe you're taking the first game.
Yeah, and the first game I've got is Burnley versus Sunderland. Look, that's a really good game to watch. Maybe not the best game to try and pick the player for. So my logic for this game is to look at the game going ahead in midweek. Burnley played Plymouth Argyle away and Sunderland played Derby away. So I feel it's pretty even, but Burnley have the arguably more favourable game for this option. You might think you can't really go wrong with each game, and looking at the reverse fixture, because we've got to that time of the year now where we can go have a look at when these teams played the first time round. Sunderland won 1-0 when these sides met in the third game of the season. They have consistently beaten teams when it comes to XG, including top sides away from home. So, like, if I look at the Sunderland game against Sheffield United away back in November, they lost 1-0, but it definitely was against the run of play. Sunderland managed to get 16 shots on target with an XG of 1.78. But if the goals don't go in, you do suffer for lack of points. And I think we might be looking at this for the game here. So I am siding with Burnley this week. When it comes to Burnley, for goals, you can only really have two options of Fleming and Brownhill. Fleming is decent form at the minute. He's a very high volume shot taker, but mainly from distance. And I'd argue that's not very repeatable. And we've covered Brownhill a lot. So I'm going to naturally move to defence. And my player is selected by 0%. And it's not my main man, Egan Riley. I am siding with Bashir Humphreys. If you look at the back four who started in the last game for Burnley, Humphreys is the lowest average point scorer, but I have good reason to include him. Scott Parker has been talking recently about his awareness of lack of goals and is trying to address this in the transfer market, but also how they play as well. And the one way they've done this is pushing Humphreys higher up the pitch to get into good positions to cross the ball. Humphreys has 2 assists in his last 4 games, so as well as gaining points like the rest of the defenders for clearances and defensive actions, there's also a potential bonus of chances created and assists for him, something you don't see in the other fullbacks.
Yep, solid pick. I think that's got potential to be the game of the game week, really. My first game of the game week is also a contender for game of the game week. It's Swansea Cardiff, the South Wales derby. Usually quite an exciting game. It can be quite tight, but usually it's quite frantic. So I'm excited to watch this one at Saturday lunchtime. And yeah, there's a few players from Swansea in particular that I favour here. They're the team I prefer out of the two. But spoiler, one of them is my sub-0.1 pick. So I'm going to come back to potential Swansea players later. And instead, I'm going to raise you a Cardiff player. And I'm going to raise you Kean Ashford. Now, Ashford has started the last 4 games and came off the bench in the game before that as well. And in that time, he has 2 goals and 2 assists. So in his last 5 games, he's on a 6-point average. And he also scored away at Sheffield United in the Cup last Thursday. So it's two goals in 2 games for him in all competitions. He's kind of like playing in the forward line. Cardiff don't really have an out-and-out forward at the moment. So the other day, Colwell took up that role, but Ashford could also take up that role. Their attacking options just aren't that great, so they're kind of looking at their younger players. And listen, like, while he's on this form, I feel like it's definitely a smart pick to look at when he's selected by 0% of players. He's obviously a youngster who's just starting to get more game time. You know, I personally am not too big a fan of Cardiff, but taking one of the attacking players who has actually got a good output for them is definitely a good option, I feel. And listen, it's a young Welsh lad in the South Wales derby. We've seen it before, and I think we could be seeing him have an impact here again. So Ashford is my suggestion for that game.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen him popping up with the goals, so I just wanted to have a look at his stats here. If you look at his shots this season, he's only had 5, but then you take into the fact he's only started 4 games, and his shots per 90 is actually 1.07. So it's, you know, he's active. He consistently gets a shot off, and if it keeps up his conversion rate, he's going to look really good this week.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on to the next game, I have been issued with Millwall versus Hull, and for this pick, I'm going to go for Millwall. They have 2 home games in Hull and then Cardiff. There isn't many players I really trust in this pitch, with Millwall not looking so solid anymore, but I do have faith in their midfield pairing of Saville and Denor. And I'm going to go for Saville this week. Saville has 39 interceptions to Denor's 45, so I feel like there's no real big difference here, but it's the chance creation that gives Saville the edge, as Saville boasts 32 key passes. So it's over one per game, where Denort has only clocked 14. This puts Saville as one of the highest chance creators in the league from a deep midfield position, and he also has a 1.75 XG this season. Despite him not scoring yet, you do feel this is coming.
Yeah, I feel like we've spoken about the two Millwall centre mids quite a few times, and always good to kind of keep them in the spotlight almost, as they're always a viable option, especially over a double game week where you know they can rack up interceptions and you hope they can contribute a bit further forward. My next game is Plymouth Argyle versus QPR, another Saturday lunchtime. Argyle's second game of the week is away to Burnley, as you mentioned before, so it's while there's two home games for them where they've been better, it's two tough home games and they have a few injury issues. They don't really know what they're going to field these next two games, so I'm actually going to the QPR side of things. QPR themselves have Hull away as their second game. I'm going to take a striker who I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but injury has kind of kept him away from the podcast, basically. It's Michael Fry. Now, Michael Fry is 0.1% selected, and he's only got a 3.6 point average, but since returning from injury, he started their last two games and scored a goal in both of them. He's quite a physical striker. He can get on the end of crosses. He can really cause defenders problems. He scored 4 goals at home, but away to Luton earlier in the season, he grabbed a goal and assist to turn that game round and win that for them. I do think that the fragile back lines of Plymouth and Hull are going to struggle against a striker like this who can really pop up in those positions to score the goals. And just out of the two teams, I think QPR away to Plymouth, away to Hull, they're games that if they're looking to do anything more than just be obscuring the mid-table, they'll want to get good returns from these fixtures. And Michael Fry is the striker for them who's going to be the one on the end of their chances, one to score the goals. So yeah, I think the low percentage pick and the fact he's also in a goal scoring streak just makes it one to definitely look at.
Yeah, you can definitely see all his actions and his productivity happen within the box. That's kind of what he is. You don't need him to be alive the whole game and really active. It's just when the ball gets in the box, that's when he's really going to turn up. Interestingly, I just don't know why, I was looking at his defensive stats and I was like, it's actually a real shame that you don't get interceptions and that sort of thing for forwards, because he's one of the best strikers in the Championship when it comes to tackles won, duels, interceptions. So it's just a shame we can't get points there. Or I actually feel like he'd be picked a lot more than he is at the minute.
He's almost like the perfect defensive forward you would see,
Yeah.
as well as then turning into an absolute poacher in the box. He is really fun to watch. If anyone hasn't watched him, watch some clips of him. Listen, it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but really, really lively when the ball gets into that box. When there's an opportunity to press, when there's opportunity for a loose ball, he loves the battle, and when a corner comes in, he is the first one to react to anything that comes into that box. It's just a proper, almost old school number 9, and when his team has the ball, it's really good to watch.
Next game I've got is Coventry versus Bristol City. Now, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago that Bristol City were really like your mid-table team. They are average in all the underlying stats, so they were quite a consistent team to pick. But since then, I have to admit they are far better than a mid-table team. They are looking really good recently, so I'm going to side with them. They have in the second game they have 2 away games really. So the first game away, as said, is Coventry. The next game is Sheffield Wednesday. I won't spoil it too much there because I believe it's Matthew that's covering the Sheffield Wednesday game. But I've tried to stop swapping between Mehmeti and Twine each week, so I'm not going to select either of those players. So I'm going to try to avoid them. I want to look at the underrated defenders. Bristol City have a very low XG conceded of 28 goals, and O'Leary is pretty low saves per match in 2.2. So I want a defender who has a high volume of clearances and is a real menace at attacking set pieces. So I'm going to go for Luke McNally. McNally has 115 clearances this season, with 31 of them coming in the last 4 games. And I'm pretty sure you'd agree, Matt, that's high enough to point out. McNally also has 2 clean sheets in his last 3 games, whilst getting a goal and an assist in these games too.
Yeah, I really like McNally. He's someone over the last few years who has been playing for good Championship sides, and this Bristol City one look like they're going to be another good Championship side. These double game weeks I feel like are really important for. They're important for every team, but it's important because it's 6 points on offer that can really change like your outlook in the space of 5 or 6 days. If Bristol City get 2 good away wins, they're on the edge or potentially in the playoff places, and things just look really good for them. My next game, speaking of two important games in your season, it's Derby County and Watford, two sides who right now are facing issues off the field with their managers, almost for different reasons though. Derby fans are calling for Paul Warne to leave. When they lost to Leyton Orient in the FA Cup, there's that video of as Warne's going down the tunnel with fans telling him that he needs to go and be sacked. Under most of their Twitter posts, they're asking for the announcement of Warne's departure, and I think it's quite harsh because I think they need to be careful what they wish for. And then Watford, it's the opposite. Their manager is apparently under threat, and their fans are really rallying behind him. There's a supporters group making sure that it's known that they fully back Tom Cleverley and the position that he's in. They've fallen out of the playoff places, but at the start of the season, people did not rate this Watford side at all, and now suddenly that it's like being you're under pressure because of your own success.
Yeah, he's a victim
Cleverley,
of his own success. Yeah,
that's what I'm looking for. Yeah, like he starts off really well, and then the results start to fall off. They almost come back to reality a bit, and now he's under pressure from the board apparently. But it's really good to see the fans, just proper sticking with him. And yeah, it's one of those things of Derby of Watford and Sheffield United. It could be two tough games for them. If they lose them both at home, then I think things are going to start to turn, and the board might have to look at Warne's position because the fan outrage is going to be there. Whereas Watford away to Derby and at home to Preston, that's almost 2 winnable games. They win them both, pressure's back off. But Watford have like quite a few injury issues, and I look at their starting team and who's available to them, and it doesn't really strike out to me, but then it hasn't really all season. And it's similar for Derby, so it would be really, really boring here and pick Evu Adams, because out of all potential 22 starters on Saturday, he's the only one that I think has that contribution definitely at both ends of the pitch. 4 goals this season and 44 interceptions, or 1.66 interceptions per 90. He didn't feature in their last league game against Bristol City, but he did come off the bench on Tuesday night, so he is going to be available. His 6.4 point average is just too good to turn away, especially in a game like this. 0.4% selection. I mean, listen, we've seen it all season with Adams. He's that really reliable interception picking up player, and home game against Watford and Sheffield United, where Derby might not see as much of the ball, is where you think the interceptions can come into play, and he keeps popping up with goals, so there is always that. So yeah, Adams for me in this game, which I honestly found the hardest game to pick a player from. So
yeah, I've got to agree with that thought process there. Looking at this game, it's not a game where you can bank on someone getting a goal for points. It's not a game you can get assists for points, and I wouldn't trust either of them get the clean sheet either. So you've really got to look at the bonus points of interceptions, clearances, and also Adams, to give him credit, he is also in goal scoring form as well, but that's not what this pick is about. It's about who gets consistent points in, because both teams are just so inconsistent. And another fun game coming up is Luton versus Preston. Luton may look motivated for this game week with Rob Edwards departing as head coach, but I don't feel comfortable gambling on that for the whole game week, as I've only got really got the stats and the record to go off of. Luton have lost their last 4 competitive games whilst only scoring 2 goals. So Preston it is. And for the first time this month, I'm going to go for a player who has been transferred into the side in Lewis Gibson. A little bit of a risk, as you think he might come in but not play both games, being a new signing. But with this being the manager's first signing for the club, I believe he's going to have big plans for him. Gibson already has the second most clearances for Preston whilst playing for an Argyle side who you could argue didn't do it very well with Rooney, but typically played short and progressed up the pitch even when under pressure. So clearances weren't a big feature to his game, and I see the stat really rising with the Preston side. Their second game is away to Watford, certainly capable of scoring goals, but against Preston, but with Watford only managing 4 shots against Cardiff earlier this week. I have a real feeling Preston will be able to replicate this resolute structure and limit Watford's attack.
Yeah, no, really like the pick. He started in the cup against Charlton in the week in the middle of the back three. And the Preston's lineup they put out was pretty strong. So I have a feeling that he is going to play in that position come Saturday as well. So I do like that pick, yeah. And my next game is Oxford versus Blackburn, and I feel like this is like after a run of a few drab games, this is actually a really intriguing game. I feel Oxford, I really like them at the moment under Rowett. They're stubborn, but they're good going forward. They're efficient with the ball. Like Rowett really has them playing like that Millwall side a couple of years ago. Like they're hard to break down. They're annoying to play against, but when they get the ball, they have talented players who are allowed to showcase their ability. Blackburn, meanwhile, just keep rising up that table. I don't even know what to make of them because sometimes they just don't look that good a side. And then other sides, like on Wednesday night, they swatted aside Portsmouth with ease. I do think this is going to be a really interesting game. But I am going to favour Oxford here. And I do have a pick, but I'm going to quickly talk about another potential selection first, just potentially for the future, and that is Alex Matos, who's on loan from Chelsea. Just because I had a look at his stats last season when he was on loan at Huddersfield, and he had 1.89 interceptions per 90, which is really high. That's higher than Adams, that's higher than pretty much most players in the league. I don't think he's going to start because of Brannigan and Volks, but there is that potential should maybe they want to push Brannigan a little further forward. Alex Matos can start games and play more minutes, that he could become a viable pick in the future. Instead, I'm going back to my pick from last week, and it's Kieran Brown. Just his 28 points in his 2 home games under Rowett is high. 2 clean sheets in 5 for him. His 5.3 clearances per 90 is also high against a Blackburn side who you would expect to provide attacking intent, unlike the other 2 teams they've played at home recently are Argyle and Cardiff, who, while Cardiff did score 2 goals, you're not saying they're the most attacking outputting side in the league. Oxford's second game is at home to Luton, who, like you've just said, we don't really know what to expect of them under Bloomfield. It's a quick turnaround. We're going to have to get data from one game coming into this one. I don't think he's going to change everything for them overnight. I just think it's going to be a tough job for him. Blackburn's second game against Coventry, so that's also favourable. So listen, I think both teams have options here where you could pick them, but I'm going to suggest Kieran Brown just because his defensive stats are that good and he's a goal threat in what could be a tight game.
Yeah, you definitely have to ride the form of Brown. Okay, a little bit quiet in the Plimfalga game, but it probably wasn't the game that suited him to accumulate the points that he needs to. So having these home games where he's going to be heavily involved, he also gets up the pitch as well. He bombs down that left wing when they're in possession. It's fascinating to watch how much space he can get into, and he's actually got quite a good delivery on him. So yeah, I'd be happy with that pick, putting him forwards. Now I'll move us on to the next game and back onto a really fun, fascinating game. I've got Portsmouth versus Middlesbrough. I'm going to go for a forward for this game. I haven't spoken about one yet on the pod, and look, that might be a concern to some listeners because it's well known that this is my weakness, but we're going to go for it. Middlesbrough have 2 in Latte Laff, who is reportedly targeted for a transfer this month, and a very capable Conway. So, Matthew, who would you choose out of this?
You know that one's going to start one game and one's going to start the other, so you have to basically flip a coin and see which game you prefer.
Well, I'm glad you said this because I am sticking my neck out and I'm going for Callum Lang. You might ask why, but Portsmouth have 2 home games, and it might be the only time I can talk about Portsmouth for a little while. They have a tough fixture in the second game against a stubborn Stoke side under Robbins, but this is where Portsmouth, in their last 4 home games, bear in mind they've only played 4 home games since the start of December. They scored 3 or more goals in 3 of those games. So I'm going to take a bit of a gamble here Lang is Portsmouth's top goal scorer this season, sitting on 9 goals. He also had 3 assists. I get he's an odd pick, but with Portsmouth looking much stronger at home, especially when they've been on a poor run away, it's not really affected their home form. I thought he was worth mentioning. He has a real potential to get some big point totals. And if you think I'm a bit mental, then check this out. Humphreys was selected by 0% of players. McNally was selected by 0.1. Saville, 0.8. Gibson, 0.1. Whilst Lang is being selected by 1.9%. Okay, they might not be playing still, but he is my highest selected player putting forward this week.
Yeah, I definitely back Callum Lang as well, as we'll all find out shortly when we reveal our full teams. Spoilers there. Yeah, no, I like that. My next game is Sheffield United versus Norwich. I think another intriguing tie. But I had a look at Norwich. You know, their second game is away to Leeds as well, so this is really tough back-to-back fixtures for them. Norwich's record versus the top 13 this season. They've played 13 games because they played QPR twice. They've won once, drawn 6, and lost 6. They're really poor against the good teams, and I know, obviously they're the good teams, but Norwich, while they're kind of starting to pick up some form, they kind of need to get something out of these next 2 games, or show something more in these next 2 games to show that they have it in them to kind of break into those playoff places. I don't think they are going to here. I think it's going to be a tough one. But then on the Sheffield United side of things, they're struggling with injuries. That midfield's looking light. They've kind of hit a little bit of a rough patch of form as in terms of being a good team. Their last 2 home games have seen them lose to Burnley and draw against West Brom. But I'm kind of suggest Tom Davies in the midfield, a 0% selection, which I can understand because he obviously joined them midway through the season. He's not been starting every game, but he has started to start more recently. Per 90, he has 1.65 shots and 1.32 interceptions. So he kind of covers both aspects we're looking for in a midfielder. Potential to pick up interceptions and potential to score goals. He scored on his debut or his second game against Sunderland earlier in the season. So we know we know his talent. We've seen his talent in the Premier League. He's starting to get minutes. He's starting to look more like that player. His 4.4 point average includes a lot of coming off the bench, but when he starts, the average is 5.4 points, which I think is solid enough to be able to back here. Sheffield United's second game of the game week is away to Swansea, so whilst that's a tough game, that could be one where we look to factor in the interception bias because of Swansea's style of play. Swansea want to have more of the ball. Davies has more chance of picking up interceptions in that second one. So yeah, Tom Davies definitely in for a shout from myself this week.
Yeah, I just wanted to look at the metrics, how he's done per 90 against the rest of the Championship midfielders. He's in the top 30% for defensive actions, top 30% for goals, top 20% for shot attempts. He's doing really well. You were worried it was going to take a little while for him to bed in, but he's come in. He's been really consistent. I don't know if he's going to explode with interceptions or not, but you don't really need it to, especially with double game week. You're going to get a solid amount of points over those 2 games with him. And the last game for me, before you go on to your last game, I have West Brom versus Stoke. On paper, this is a fun fixture. Well, I think it is. Nathan Lowe has returned to Stoke with Tom Cannon being recalled, and you expect him to play some part of these games unless Stoke's aim is to loan him to a League One side, which means he couldn't play for Stoke. So it will be interesting to see if we see him in the side or not. On the other side of things, West Brom's Josh Maja has suffered a recent injury, which appears to require surgery, meaning we won't see Maja on the pitch for a fair while. So with West Brom's strike force weakened and Stoke turning the corner and looking really good defensively, especially recently, I would go back in for Johansson, who was picked up by Matt very recently, but I'm going to try and be a little bit more, not if I say I'm more original, I'm going to try and be original. And I am going to go for my theme of low selected players with Ashley Phillips. Phillips has 3 clean sheets in a row, including the games against Burnley and Sunderland. So there's solid reasoning behind this pick. Since Robbins has come in, Phillips' clearances per 90 has also increased. other than the recent game against Plymouth, who just provided no real attack and threat. So Phillips only got one clearance there. Their second game is against Portsmouth, so I might sound like I'm contradicting myself, but sadly, when it's a double game week, you're going to get those cases here.
Yeah, Phillips is a solid pick. Physical presence at the back. Well, with Portsmouth, those clearance numbers can definitely add up. The Portsmouth threat at home is real. You know, they're a good home side. They're just terrible away from home, so that could be a really interesting game to watch too. Yeah, like you say, I feel like Stoke are starting to turn a corner under Robbins, but yeah, maybe it's more let's start back and work forward. We'll be
Yes.
definitely be interested to see if Nathan Lowe features or not. As like you say, if he plays just a minute, then it's either Stoke or Walsall for the end of the season for him. So yeah, I definitely think that's the big eye catching thing to keep an eye on here, as well as can Ashley Phillips get a load of clearances.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I would have loved to put Lowe in for this pick, but I need to know if he's going to play or not. It just felt like a wasted pick if when you don't really know what the outcome's going to be.
Exactly, yeah. You like, especially over a double game week, you know, like they're not going to throw him in the deep end, I'd say, if they are
No.
going to use him. So
Yeah, but so you've got to also remember he is going up 2 levels to a team who's okay. Last goal scorer did score a decent amount of goals, but they don't create tons of chances like the Walsall side does against worse defenders. Like even if he comes in, it's going to be really hard for him.
And to round off the weekend, we have Leeds versus Sheffield Wednesday, which is the Sunday lunchtime game. And it's also going to be the first game shown on ITV this season, which I think is quite fun if you're in the UK. I mean, it is on Sky Sports, you have Sky Sports, but you know, I think that is a fun way to get some more football out there for, you know, for the casual fans, and this I think is going to be a good game. Now, but listen, I'm going to pick a Leeds player. But before I pick a Leeds player, I mean, no shock there. I want to talk about Sheffield Wednesday, and I want to talk about last night. So we're recording this Thursday, 16th of January. So last night, Wednesday the 15th, was their fans forum with their chairman, Chanziri, and there are some really interesting stories that came out of this. In terms of Fantasy EFL, the most notable thing that came out was Shay Charles is being recalled, and it came out 9 minutes after Chanziri said he wasn't being recalled, that he left the room to take a phone call and came back and said he was being recalled. So, I
Can I
mean,
just butt
listen,
in there?
go on.
I've got such a strong feeling that the decision makers at Southampton were watching were watching this forum with when Chanzeri said that Shay Charles wasn't good enough to play for Southampton. He didn't feel like he would be at the level, and I think Southampton had gone, oh, you know what, we just need to get him out of this environment.
Yeah, it does all seem. I mean, listen, there's nothing new for Sheffield Wednesday and Sheffield Wednesday fans, but it all just seemed so chaotic, and Chanziri is trying to dig himself out of a hole every 2 minutes. And, you know, he says that Danny Roll and his staff haven't come to him with any player targets, so that's why they haven't made any signings in January. Like, it all just seems a little bit like he's trying to deflect anything that comes his way back onto someone else rather than just, you know, support the team and support the manager. It was just a bit chaotic, and listen, it's well worth looking at some of the stuff that has come out of that. But yeah, with no Shay Charles, who is one player I do like picking in Fantasy EFL because he's got some great all round, you know, great interceptor, but can contribute further forward. There's no one in that Sheffield Wednesday team that really takes my fancy at all over the two games then. And so I'm going for Leeds, and Leeds' issue in this game is who's going to start for them going forward. Their forward numbers are so inconsistent. You know, you've got Aronson, Solomon, James, Nonto, Peru, Joseph. You've got some incredible options there, but you just don't know who's going to be the one to provide the final touch each week. Ramazani as well, he's an option, but is he going to play or not? Or, like, you know, they spent quite a bit on him in the summer. So instead, I'm going to go for someone who's more consistent. And whilst they do have the injury worries around some of their defenders, I do think that now's the time where they're going to try and stamp their authority at the top of the table, and their best players are going to play both games here. So I'm going Jayden Bogle. Jaden Bogle's been fantastic this season at right back. He's 3.2% selected and a 6.5 point average. 3 goals and 2 assists, as well as 2.5 tackles, 2.11 clearances, 0.73 blocks. His assists as well come with an XA of 3.9. So again, someone's not finishing off the chances for him to get some more assists. And he's also picked up 13 clean sheets in the 24 games he's played, which is brilliant. And then Leeds at home, they've got 2 home games, 8 clean sheets in 13 home league games for Leeds. Like, it just makes sense that when Leeds are at home to back a defender or a goalkeeper. The reason I'm not backing the goalkeeper, Meslier, is probably obvious that it's... I don't know who's going to start this weekend, because are they going to use Darlow playing against Harrogate as a way to get Darlow in full time, or are they going to go back to Meslier? And if Mellier's in goal, we've seen the frustrations, we've seen the mistakes. It could cost us here with a defensive pick, but just going to kind of have to take it with Bogle and hope that if it does, the other points come in to make up for that. So yeah, Bogle for me is the standout here in this game.
Yeah, I definitely get the issues that you'd be going through. I remember I spoke about Leeds, it must be in the last double game week that they had, and how much they rotate. Basically all their front forward players, apart from Aronson, who's the only mainstay, like you say. So instead of picking someone who's also effective off the bench then on the field, why not pick somebody who's had been really good this season and is going to play?
So that brings us on to our sub 0.1 picks for the week. As always, myself and Ian will pick a player who's been selected at the time of recording by 0.1% of players or less to put them in our team for the week. And we have to have one of these every week. So I will start us off this week. And as mentioned earlier, I was going to pick a Swansea player. That's why I didn't speak about a Swansea player earlier. It's someone who I've picked before. I'm coming back in because the last time I picked this player, he didn't even start and didn't even play. So, rather frustratingly, since then, he has actually scored in back-to-back games. It's Goncalo Franco coming back in while he's 0.1% selected. 5.2 point average, 1.43 interceptions per 90. I decided that after last time, listen, this time he's too good to not play. They can't leave him out again. He is so much better than the alternatives, which are Fulton and, is Fulton basically. Grimes and Franco is a much better midfield. The second game they have is against Sheffield United, so chance of interceptions there. I kind of mentioned the same for Tom Davis going both ways. So, there'll be a tougher opposition than Cardiff, but Cardiff, has the incentive that it is a derby game. So, listen, I just think the fact he's found his goal scoring boots, which I suggested that he was going to before, and has frustratingly missed out on points on, I don't want to be missing out anymore. I'm going back in for him. It's Franco. Because the interceptions, because the goals, because he's an all-round threat in that midfield.
I love a little redemption story as well. So it's time that he pays you back. Talking of redemption story, well, it's not even a redemption, it's a reunited. I wanted to go to CJ Egan-Riley, but I remember I've said this maybe a month ago now, I've banned myself from picking him. I don't know how he's still 0.1. It's probably, this week it's probably because it was the FA Cup week, but before that he's always been able to be selected. So I've gone for somebody else. I have gone for another defender who they do play in the second game. It's Julio Pleguezuelo. Now, he has come in the league game, the last 3 games he's come in due to a change of system, playing 3 at the back, especially with Lewis Gibson being sold to Preston. And his clearance numbers, as you mentioned last week, are phenomenal. I mean, they didn't keep the clean sheet last in the game against Oxford, but he still managed 9 clearances and 3 tackles. And I've got to be honest, those 9 clearances, it didn't feel like it was a sort of game, and Oxford put Argo under enough pressure to also get the 9 clearances. So with a really dominant QPR striker and having Burnley, who are going to have a lot of pressure at home, I can only see these going up. Should mention that Argo have got a new manager now in Miron Muslik, who has a very... if you look at his pass record, he has quite a direct style of play. They don't really want to pass out too much. So that's kind of where the clearances, I'm hoping, come from here. going to be pushed further up the pitch. But look, they're not going to be high up the pitch against this Burnley side, so I still feel like they're going to be sat back. Lots of clearances, lots of blocks. So that's what I'm going for there.
I backed it last week in terms of fantasy points. He's racking up clearances like a maniac, and he dives into challenges. He dives in the way for blocks. He is almost the perfect fantasy player if they could just keep clean sheets as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They don't have to really see too much of an improvement defensively, because even if they don't, he's still going to be really busy. So yeah, no, smart pick. Was looking to add a Plymouth Argyle player. Didn't think it was going to be a defender, but it helps how active they are.
Definitely. So should we round up our teams at the moment for this week? Listen, we had a quick chat beforehand. I think our teams might change before kickoff. There is a game tonight. It is Shrewsbury Wrexham tonight. But both of them have single game weeks, I believe. So I'm not picking any Shrewsbury or Wrexham players. I don't believe you're picking any Shrewsbury or Wrexham players. But just beware, if anyone does have any in their team, you'll need them out before tonight, or they're going to be locked in if you don't want to pick them, that is. But yeah, so my team at the moment looks like this. I've got Lucas Jensen in goal for Millwall. Their home games against Hull and Cardiff, I think, are two of the more favourable home games in the league. Bogle in defence I spoke about, and then my other two defenders actually come from outside the Championship. I've got Anthony O'Connor, who has 2 home games for Harrogate, but his clearance numbers are just ridiculous. So I'm going to back him over 2 games. And then at the moment I also have Lloyd Jones for Charlton. Charlton have started to pick up form again, even without the clean sheet. Lloyd Jones' numbers recently have been really, really good. He got 9 points against Wickham at home, 7 points against Cambridge at home. There was no clean sheet in either of those games. It all came from clearances and tackles. He made 25 clearances against Reading. So I think he's just going to be continuing that trend for Charlton. Rotherham and Bolton away from home are pretty good opponents to rack up at least a side coming on to attack you. And then in the Bolton game, they've just sold Dion Charles and have no goal scorers now. Well, I mean, they have options who should score goals, but no one's scoring goals for them. So listen, I think that could be a game where Charlton really, really frustrate the life out of Bolton, and we may eventually just see the end of Ian Evatt at Bolton. My midfield at the moment, I've got Edu Adams and Goncalo Franco, and then up front, as hinted at earlier, I do have Callum Lang.
And for my team, I have gone for James Trafford in goal. I've gone for Julio Peguezuelo as being my sub 0.1 pick, Ashley Phillips and Luke McNally. So I've gone for 3 defenders, just high volume and pretty consistent points total. As we mentioned before, defenders just seem to be pretty consistent point totals. So a double game week, I feel like it's just a way to ensure myself. And then I've gone for George Saville and Scott Twine in my midfield. And up front, I've also gone for Callum Lang.
And that then brings us on to our final section for the week, which is our teams to win. And as always, myself and Ian will place a £5 bet on those 2 teams to win and have a head-to-head record to see who has the most returns over the course of the season. Currently, Ian, you are ahead. You're on a very healthy £60 profit, whilst mine has slipped back down to £7 after two losses in a row. We both lost last week. We both ended up with Walsall and Crewe, and that Crewe failure to win unfortunately meant we both had losers. So yeah, as I said, this is for over 18s only, and please gamble responsibly. Ian, do you want to talk about your 2 teams first?
Yeah, sure. So my first team I've gone for is Bristol City, for the bet that they play against Coventry away. I think it's quite a favourable game. I've spoke about how I think Bristol City are looking really good recently, and we both just stated that if Bristol City get these 2 wins, they are really pushing for this playoff charge, and I feel like they're quite capable, with Sheffield Wednesday being the second game, both away, so hope for the bonus points there. Next team I've gone for, is Oxford United. They played 2 home games, looking really good lately. They just really annoy, and they're quite a stubborn team, and they're very effective. So the game for the bet that they play is a home game against Blackburn Rovers, with the second game against Luton at home as well. So my £5 returns me £52.15. And look, it's the time of the season where I think there's some real money to be made with the good odds here.
Very, very nice. Yeah, I'm joining you on the Bristol City pick. Yeah, the reasons you've said, I like them as a team. The two aways when it comes to fantasy, that could be really, really good returns if they can win them both, establish themselves as playoff contenders here. A lot to like from Bristol City. My other side, I'm dipping into League One and going Wigan Athletic. They have an away game against Stevenage and then a home game against Burton. So for fantasy, I think there is a chance they go to Stevenage and win. They've actually won through the last 5 away games, including some tough games against Barnsley. Their 2 losses were at Huddersfield and Wrexham, 2 really good sides. So I think that nothing too much in that away form to scare me. Stevenage are a solid home side, but their games are usually quite tight against good opposition. So I think there's a chance that Wigan can, for the bet, go there and win. And then the home against Burton, I just think Burton are the worst team in that league, and you kind of back Wigan to have too much for them. So just to outdo your bet slightly, my bet returns £55.63.
That's really trying to catch me up. Yeah.
This is very much playing catch up at this point. So I will be hoping that at least one of yours doesn't come off and mine do come off, and I will just about take the lead. So that is the difference at the moment. So Wigan and Bristol City are my 2 picks.
And of course, we're picking these picks to pick up points, but I do have it in mind that I want to get a lead on you on our little mini table here as well. So I'm trying to find a right balance here.
Yeah, I will say, these might seem like ridiculous picks, but I think the obvious pick this week is Leeds United. I've used them 3 times. If I use them again, I will only have one more chance to pick them. And that brings us to the end of the show. As always, please do follow us on our socials, on X at FBBDpod, at Bluesky, at Football Breakdown. Keep up to date with any changes we make to our teams before the weekend, as I feel like we could be making some. And if the postponements hit again, which I don't think they're expected to, I think that it's a bit warmer this weekend. But we will be posting any updates there as well. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Matthew.
And take it easy.